Hello, I'm Steve Cohen, and this is Congressional Report. The 111th Congress has started. We have a new president. The inauguration of Barack Obama, the first bill he signed, the Children's Health Care Plan, passed in the previous Congress, vetoed by President Bush. It's been signed into law. It has great benefits for the Med. Mississippi and Arkansas will continue to be able to use Medicaid payments to pay for the indigents treated at our hospital, the Med, and disproportionate share, a major funding portion of the Med, approved, all with the work of a bipartisan group from Tennessee, Senator Corker, Senator Alexander, Congressmen Tanner, Cooper, Gordon, and myself. Good start. Now we have to work on the economy, and that's our two guests, and that's why we're going to discuss it with them. The two pros in Memphis on the economy, Dr. David Kemme from the University of Memphis, a PhD from Ohio State University, and I think the chairman or the president of the Economic Club?
Executive Director.
Executive Director of the Economic Club. And Dr. Bruce Scheer, who is with the graduate, a PhD from Purdue University, came here through Willard Sparks's good efforts and is now the CEO and chairman of the board of Informa, a business group here. And I got to really know a lot about the economy from going to an Economic Club program where Dr. Scheer and Dr. Kemme spoke. And I wanted them to have the chance to discuss with me and with our listeners, viewers, the economy
happy
as
to be here.
Good to have you each.
Pleasure.
Where we stand, the economy, we all say it's about the worst it's been since the Depression. Is it that bad, or is it the worst since the 80s?
Well, it's certainly the worst since the 80s, and the jury's out. The decline in GDP, the flash estimate for last quarter is 3.8%. Could be a little worse, could be a little better, but already this recession will certainly be the longest recession since the Great Depression, or even before the Great Depression. So in terms of the length of the recession, it's about as bad as we've seen. The severity depends actually on the Congressional stimulus program, how fast it's enacted, and how fast the money shows up to create jobs and dampen the fall in the economy. The Fed's stimulus program is historical in scope, bigger than anything ever. And I think Bernanke, as a student of the Great Depression, is doing everything right. He learned a lot by what the Fed didn't do at that time. So we have incredibly strong stimulative monetary policy and now fiscal policy. And I think everything in terms of policy making is moving in the right direction to dampen the severity. So it will be a long recession, but hopefully not as severe as anything like the Depression, not even close, because of effective government policy.
Dr. Scheer, do you agree that the stimulus package has reinvestment and recovery program, that's the new words, that plus the Fed are the right steps we need to take to avoid a more prolonged and deeper recession?
Oh, absolutely. I think David made excellent points. To add to that just a little bit, I would expect this recession to go all the way through into the summer months. As David indicated, we had a 3.8% decline in GDP for the fourth quarter of last year. Now, that's a little better than most expected. Most were expecting 5.5% decline. Of course, we had some inventory buildup, which is not so good. So if you had that in, it might represent about 5% decline. Second quarter, maybe about the same. I'm sorry, the first quarter of this year, maybe about the same, the quarter we're in right now. And then in the second quarter, I think we might go half as much. And by the third quarter of this year, predicated on the policy initiatives that are in the works, the Fed's activities to date, and a rebuilding of confidence in the economy, I think we could come out of this recession by the third quarter, and by next year start to see growth rates of maybe 2 or 3% per year. The trick is that the blend of tax cuts and the infrastructure investment and spending will create jobs. Those jobs in turn will create consumption, and the economy will start to move along again. It's still the case, though, that the banking system, while I think there's been lots of medicine provided to the banking system, not just in this country, but all over the world, still needs to regain its confidence and the confidence of the public.
Well, you've mentioned several times to me that it's confidence, and people need to have the attitude. Kind of Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, that if we have that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. With the banks, we've had the first TARP, $350 billion. Most people either don't know what happened with that money or they don't like what happened with the money. Went to banks. They didn't use it necessarily to stimulate lending and have more liquidity. Do you feel that $350 billion was necessary to guarantee the financial system just didn't go under?
Absolutely. I think at the time the TARP was passed, the economy was bleeding and it needed a tourniquet. I think we're in a little different situation today. I think that the tourniquet helped to limit what would have been, in my opinion, a disaster, a crash and burn. Mm-hmm. Today, I think it's more complicated. The interest rate indicators, and I don't want to get too arcane here, but the interest rate indicators for the banks are back in line. LIBOR rates are back around 1%. The difference between Treasury bills and LIBOR are roughly 1% because Treasury bills are so low today. That says that the marketplace where LIBOR is determined is believing that the banks are almost as safe as what I call the government mattress, which is the T-bill. The problem is the banks have bad ratios, mainly predicated on the housing situation and the bust of the housing bubble. The assets that the banks hold have declined so much in value that when you compare their outstanding loans or their liabilities against that asset level, the ratio is not good. So I'm thinking, and David, maybe you'll mm-hmm. comment on this, mm-hmm. I'm thinking that if we could just adjust the accounting method, we have what we call mark to the market, which take the assets where they are today. If we just went to a 3-year rolling average, those asset values, which I think would be more representative, would rise. The ratio between the assets against the liabilities would come into a better ratio. And I think the banks would have not just confidence, but even legitimacy to start lending to commercial, to businesses, and businesses, again, to households, and the process goes forward. And that's what I think we need.
So, David, you agree that while the public and the politicians, myself included, disappointed in part because we had the impression that this would help with the liquidity crisis, the fundamentals were so bad that they just needed, the mm-hmm. banks needed mm-hmm. to have that money to buy up debt?
Yeah, I think the TARP program really tried to address, as Bruce was saying, the bank balance sheets, which were on the asset side, the assets were disappearing because if you mark to market and the market for those assets doesn't exist, a lot of these things are over the counter, can't be priced, and so on. So the TARP programs, I think, stabilized some of the bank balance sheets. What was happening simultaneously is the credit markets were locking up because banks wouldn't lend to each other as well. And the Federal Reserve, at the same time, Treasury was injecting money into individual banks to stabilize their balance sheets. The Federal Reserve was injecting 4 or 5 times that amount into the credit markets by buying accounts receivables, commercial paper, and so on, things that it never bought before. They introduced 12 new lending programs to put more liquidity into the credit markets. So last winter, the interbank lending between banks and the corporations for daily working capital and so on, that almost disappeared. The economy was really about to lock up. And that would have been a financial catastrophe, that both the Federal Reserve policies, interventions were essential, and the TARP program was essential. And I think the next phase of it is as well. Now the question is, and the question you should be asking as a congressman, as our representative, is whether that money is being well utilized by the banks and is it being accounted for. And I think ultimately it will be. Treasury will have to be keeping track of where that money is and getting it back. Most of it is loans or purchases of preferred shares, which the Treasury will at some point sell, hopefully make a profit on. So the ultimate cost to taxpayers of the TARP program should be near zero, or they should make a profit.
You know, if I could just comment about that, I think it's another good point. Part of the problem of confidence is that we're a society of instant gratification. We didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to come out of it overnight. And so to rebuild the confidence is going to take some time, and those banks will slowly get better. We were in such a crisis mode, and it was such a helter-skelter move to do something quickly, which I think was absolutely necessary, in part because the U.S., it was the U.S. that had the institutional failure. Had it been almost any other place in the world, we could have stepped in and salved the problem. But the fact that it was the U.S., it spread all over the world quickly, and it created such a crisis mode that we needed, triage. We're beyond triage today. We're way beyond triage. There's pent-up liquidity. There is policy through stimulative packages, not just here, but in other places around the world, China and Brazil and elsewhere. Germany. The world is on the brink of seeing an enormous amount of liquidity and growth medicine come into play. And so it's going to take 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 months before we start to see the benefit of that. And so we have to be somewhat patient. If we want it all to turn around tomorrow afternoon, we're going to be disappointed. And that only leads to less confidence. And I think, unfortunately, the political side of the argument has, I think it's been a give and take, sort of appeal to that impatience. And at the same time, the impatience, I think, draws the political side of things to be less steady state than I think we need to be at this stage of the game.
The second portion of the TARP, which the Obama administration will spend, Geithner and company, rather than Paulson and the Bush team, will be more transparent, and there will be limits on executive pay. There will be requirements that there be money used to help people with foreclosures and mortgage assistance modifications. The community banks will participate. So it's going to be a lot more broader. And there will also be requirements. I think President Obama's made clear that the bonuses Wall Street was paying out need to stop, and then we'll go back and find out what went on. Do you foresee the second portion of TARP being the right mix of home mortgage foreclosure assistance and community banks, and then banks in general, that's needed at this point?
Yeah, I think, as Bruce mentioned, one thing that has to be accomplished for the recession to end and recovery to take place is consumer confidence has to be restored, and people have to start spending, increasing their consumption. Part of it is we have to create jobs, which is part of the fiscal package. The other part is that housing prices have to stabilize. And to stabilize housing prices, we need some sort of program to assist people with mortgages that are not affordable, even though they took them out, they're in trouble. And if part of the TARP program can address, provide mortgage relief, foreclosure relief, refinancing, repackaging mortgages, that's, I think, an essential component. It's probably should have been part of the first package and wasn't, and we might ask why not, but that's history, and the sooner that hits the marketplace and gets into consumers' hands, the better.
It was supposed to be part of the first one, and it was interesting. We first had our first bill, Secretary Paulson, conference call, the whole Democratic caucus with Bernanke and Paulson, and the world was ending. And the answer was a 3-page bill. Make me the emperor and I will take care of things. We didn't. We passed a 200-page bill. We included he was going to buy up the quote-unquote toxic assets. Instead, we gave him the option, which he didn't really want, of investing in the banks, which is something that I think was brought forth by Bill Isaacs, and he promoted that as a better use of the money. And then the FDIC insurance that I espoused in our Democratic caucus, and then lobbied some senators and ended up being part of the mix, raising that to $250 from $100 and extending it. Now it's going to be made permanent by the second. That wasn't part of the original proposal either. And I think it's interesting, the two main things that happened in the first TARP was the FDIC insurance, not part of the bill to start with, and putting the money into banks, which was put in by the Democratic caucus that Paulson didn't want. He got a 200-page bill. He treated it like a 3-page bill, and he just did what he wanted. But it was supposed to have foreclosure assistance too, and he just didn't do it.
Yeah,
he just didn't do it.
You know, if you've been the chairman of the CEO of Goldman, you're used to telling people what to do,
right?
Not selling it. And you know, I give him a lot of credit for the fact. I honestly believe his heart and his mind was in the right place. I think while he's a very successful man, I don't think he could sell anything to anybody. But you know, we're repositioning. The American consumer is going to come out of this problem, oddly enough, better off, because they're not going to be able to make home equity loans that they can't substantiate. There isn't all this easy credit that allows for bubble spending or inappropriate or unsubstantiable spending. And this means that as we creep out of this recession and we start to get better, we'll creep out on a better foundation. Now, I don't think people are thinking about it this way. And certainly if you lost your job or you're about to lose your job, you're not thinking about it that way. But the reality is that the economic structure and the fundamental of our economy is going to be way better and far better regulated, far better monitored. We let things get out of hand, and we're paying the price today.
Yeah, I do think, though, you said it will be far better regulated, and I think that's on the agenda yet. And that does have to take place, because there was a market failure. A lot of these collateralized debt obligations, these hybrid securities, were mispriced by the marketplace. And the risk involved was much greater than the price that the market dictated. And when the real estate market, home market, the bubble burst, these securities were much riskier than buyers thought, and the buyers shouldn't have been buying them. They were pension funds, they were municipal governments, you know, not so sophisticated buyers. They couldn't possibly tell what the risk was. That's a market failure. But there were no regulators, and these securities were purposefully unregulated, you know, by legislation, and the Securities and Exchange Commissioner went out of their way not to regulate them. So that has to be corrected. And when Bruce says that when we're done with this, things will be much better, that's true. But you know, the ball is still in the court of the Congress, and this new regulatory, these issues have to be resolved yet.
In the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and it's both recovery and reinvestment, and so this is going into greening of America and in the infrastructure, and pointing us in the right direction, as Bruce says. It's going to put us on a better path. There's a mix of a third and more than a third with the Senate bill on taxing policy, and the rest of it's on infrastructure and programs. How do you see that mix? Do you think was it necessary to have the tax cuts, or would you have preferred there not be tax cuts?
I like the mix. I think certainly, and I'm greatly appreciative of the tax cuts being applied to people with incomes of under $250,000 per annum.
Which really 150,000 married, 75,000 single, and it phases out at 200 and 100.
Which was the president's campaign wish, and I think that's a good idea. You know, there are these somewhat loose estimates that for every $1 billion worth of tax cuts, we could create something on the order of 12,000, 13,000 jobs. Infrastructure, which I think is an area of dramatic requirement. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave us their infrastructure grade just this week. I think it was a D minus.
Yeah.
And it was 15 areas covering water to the electric grid to waste treatment facilities and ports and the like. And they said we need $22 billion over 5 years. So the need is certainly well established. Infrastructure gives you a little more bang for the buck, probably 18 to 20,000 jobs per billion invested. The trick is to, and what I think, it's easy to get the tax cut going quickly, and so it feels good. It's harder to find so-called shovel-ready projects. It's also hard to find people who want to pick up the shovel. I'm not so sure some of those Lehman Brothers bankers are going to want to grab a shovel and build roads and the like. But that's a little slower.
I want to be doing it in black and white outfits.
Well, that's right. That's right. But you know, that's the deliberateness of the infrastructure it's that patience factor again. But in the long haul, those infrastructure investments are even more supportive of the economy because the tax cut we spend, we get the benefit immediately, but it doesn't have as much sustaining power as, you know, building a port or investing in a school. I mean, certainly education and at all levels, the requirement for investment is extraordinary.
Yeah,
lasting.
Congressman, one thing I like about this spending is it's purposeful. I think our mistake in the last 8 years or so, if you look at the government deficit at that time, which was record-setting, for the last 8 years, most of the deficit was caused by the war in Iraq, and that generated nothing in terms of domestic production, infrastructure, productivity increases. This bill, you still have to deal with the war and so forth, but the government expenditures in this bill are more purposeful. You know, as Bruce said, the infrastructure has staying power. It increases our productivity for everyone that can get to work a little bit faster because of a better highway. The educational expenditures, building human capital, which there's a huge return on in the future, have longer staying power than the short-run tax cuts and increase in consumption or whatever that they may provide. So the mix,
renewable energy, reducing our foreign energy dependence.
Yeah.
The grid, a smart grid, which hasn't been quite proven out, not to my mind yet, but I think there are prospects that a smart grid could reduce energy consumption by being able to time features. David's so right. I mean, there's just lasting, expandable benefits from infrastructure. The other way we did it with the last administration was we gave everybody a tax rebate. And we saw 2 quarters of consumption increase, and the economy didn't have any sustaining value from that. Now, I'm all for people keeping what they earn. All of us are. But there's the realities about building this economic base that can sustain us into the future, a base that we've, quite frankly, neglected.
Absolutely.
Over the last, I'm going to say over the last 8 to 10 years, last decade easily.
What about the argument that many make, Republicans predominantly, more conservative folk, maybe Feldstein, that the debt that we're taking on is so great that our next generation has to pay for it? Can we?
You know, that sustainability of this economic base that we're talking about has a tremendous multiplier. And you know, it would be foolish and foolhardy to sit here and say, oh, gee, we should spend $1.5 trillion and have a deficit that large, and that's frivolous. We don't really care. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. We should be as fiscally responsible as we possibly can. But my own opinion is, in a restructured new base that plays in a greatly, we haven't even talked about this, a world economy that I think will expand on the backs of the Chinese and the Indians and the Brazilians and others around the world. The income generation and our ability to participate in a competitive way in that will build our GDP at levels and magnitudes that will offset that debt into the future if we do it right and become fiscally responsible as we grow and not just consumers.
All right, that's we're going to have more savings and have to cut back on some entitlements
Absolutely.
down the line.
We need to adopt we baby boomers like me, we need to adopt the values of our parents from the Depression and World War II, and I think we'd be far better off.
We've only got a few minutes left. Does it concern either of you that we have so much debt going out to the Chinese and some of the Saudis and all who are buying our paper? Or should we thank them?
That's a great question.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, yes.
I think it is a concern. I think, when I went to school, way back, we thought that the government deficits were not so bad because we bought the debt, we self-financed internally. And I think now the amount of the debt that's being purchased by foreign governments has to be thought about more seriously. I think with respect to Saudi Arabia, I think in the Middle East, I think that it's a price of oil issue, and I'll say it, and I know no one in Congress would buy it, but I do think we need to stabilize the price of gasoline at a higher level by having a very high tax on gasoline, $1 a gallon. And I'll say that every dollar that doesn't go to the Middle East and stays here is a good dollar. We have to have a more serious energy policy that reduces our consumption of oil, foreign oil. And as you said, the green, the renewable energy parts of this bill go in that direction.
Better cafe standards, more mass transit money, et cetera.
And I think urban transportation is something that needs to be addressed and improved. It's part of the infrastructure to improve urban mass transportation. It's making our citizens more productive, more efficient, because it is it's a tough world out there, and we are competing globally.
We got to wrap up, but I spoke briefly on the floor the other day, praising Fred Smith for not laying people off, but having across-the-board cuts, 20% for himself. Most corporations didn't do that. They axed 10,000, 15,000, 5,000 people. Could the other corporations have done it and taken Fred Smith's example?
Certainly, and I think for the intermediate to longer term, the payback is to the shareholder, while the employee stays in their job, because the firm will do better and the firm will again reposition to a new economic situation and improve its profitability, and it comes back to the shareholder. I think all in all it was a pretty good idea. I think he did the right thing there as well.
I appreciate each of you coming and sharing your thoughts, and we could be here for longer, but time's up. So Dr. Bruce Scheer, Dr. David Kemme, thank you for bringing the Economics Club to cable television and sharing your ideas.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
You're very welcome. I appreciate each of you. I'm Steve Cohen, and our guests have discussed, as they have at the Economic Club, some of their thoughts on the economy. It's not an easy picture. Barack Obama has a presidency, kind of like Lionel Hollins has a basketball team. Don't expect the NBA playoffs for Lionel Hollins. Don't expect overall, economic panacea with President Obama, but we're on the way. I'm Steve Cohen. This has been Congressional Report.
The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun. Just thinking about tomorrow. Here's away the cobwebs and sorrow. Till there's none. When I'm stuck in the day that's gray and lonely, I just stick out my chin and grin and say, oh, oh, ooh. Tomorrow, tomorrow, I love ya. Tomorrow, you're only a day away.
Your help is our hope. Please, give today.
Integrity first. Service before self. Excellence in all we do. These are not just words. These are our core values. Values by which each and every member of the Air Force Reserve lives. So whether we are deploying humanitarian aid or providing natural disaster relief or defending freedom wherever it's threatened, the men and women of the Air Force Reserve are there, protecting our values and serving our country. Air Force Reserve, above and beyond.
I'm Steve Cohen, and this is Congressional Report. The 111th Congress, the 44th President of the United States, a whole new beginning. And with us to share the events of the inauguration of the 44th President, three Memphians who attended the inauguration. On my left, Carrie Hayes, who works at Soulsville Stax Music Academy. Stephanie Ferrara, who is a florist, weddings and things at Alcee and Elvis Presley. And Regina Osei, who's in the travel business. Welcome all to Congressional Report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What a great day, January 20, 2009. Will you ever forget it?
No, we won't forget it.
I think I'm still recovering from it.
A lot of walking and a lot of cold.
That's right.
Exactly.
Thank goodness for the toe warmers and the chemical hand warmers.
You purchased those, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, did your toe warmers work?
They did.
Mine
thankfully.
didn't.
They wore off after a couple hours, but they got me down there anyway.
How many, it's a larger crowd I think anybody's ever been in. They estimated 2 million people in the mall. Regina, where were you during the swearing in?
Actually, we were very close to the reflecting pool, very close to the head of it, nearest the Capitol. So we had an absolutely great spot in front of a great jumbotron. And from my binoculars, I could actually see President Obama.
It was a massive crowd, and most people, anybody that came could go to the standing areas. There were standing areas that were closer up where you needed tickets, but still, I think everybody had to go. And Kerry, you had a standing area seat, and you ran into a problem that many other people ran into.
That's right. We were not alone, but we had tickets for what they were calling the purple section, and we got down there pretty early in the morning. We were in line by about 7 o'clock, but we were in a line with several thousand folks that was snaking down the 395 tunnel and did not end up getting to our allotted section in time for the swearing in. But as I've reminded myself many times since then, we were still in a throng of people when President Obama was sworn in, which was the objective. So it was a terrific experience. I got to meet a ton of great people from all over the United States. I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
Were you able to see the Capitol or see the area where he was or hear it?
I was able to hear a little bit of it. I could certainly hear the sort of the roar of the crowd when he took the stage, so I knew that he was where he needed to be, and I could see the top of the dome of the Capitol kind of in the distance. So I knew everything was happening the way that it should have been. And it was funny, my friend and I were sort of wandering around trying to figure out a way to get in when we heard the cannon fire, the 21-gun salute after the swearing in. So I knew that he had taken the oath, which was the important thing.
It was, I feel sorry for the folks who had that experience, because the travel and the preparation and the cold and getting up, and Senator Feinstein's going to study and try to find out what happened. I don't know that we'll ever have a crowd this big again,
right?
So she'll study. But it was a shame. And we had several people come in. We've tried, for those people who had those problems, I think Senator Feinstein's going to try to send out a special little package of some sort. And you relayed your thoughts as she requested to her office.
Yeah. Well, and it was, it was tough. Certainly, like you say, we were not the only people in that predicament. And I'm sure that anytime you have 2 million people in any kind of small space, you're going to run into some hiccups. But everybody was safe. I mean, I was amazed to hear that after the day happened, nobody had been arrested, nobody had been hurt, and the new president was sworn in safely. So that was the most important thing.
Stephanie, where were you positioned?
We actually didn't have the greatest spot, as it seems like the two of them. Well, your spot wasn't that good, was it, Carrie? But we were not really that close to a jumbotron. We were in the silver section where our tickets were, and we were close enough to see the silhouette of President Obama and all of the grandeur of the Capitol building. It was beautiful. I think some of the best memories that I have of it actually were walking, getting off of the bus, and we got off at Eastern Market and walked to the mall, and it was like a pilgrimage. All of those people walking towards the Capitol, it was just a really good feeling, and everyone. The camaraderie, it was just a really feel-good spirit that you had the whole time that we were there. I can't really express it, and I don't know if we'll be able to actually duplicate something like that again.
And how was Lou Gossett?
Lou Gossett was great. He was very cordial. I don't think that he wanted to. Very understated, didn't want anyone to really know who he was, actually. It started with a conversation that we were having as we were walking towards the mall area, where he asked the question, where are you from? Have you ever seen anything like this before? And my sister and I shared with him that we probably would never see anything like that again. And it was we had quite a bit of conversation, basically wanted to know where we were from and things like that. And at first I didn't recognize who he was, and I asked him, well, where are you from? And he said, California by way of Brooklyn, New York. And we had a really, really good conversation.
Yeah. Now, who else, did either of y'all, either Stephanie, somebody else, or Regina or Carrie, see anybody else that people in Memphis would say, hey, that's lucky you saw them, or who surprise sightings?
No, not so much. We went to, there was a big concert at the Lincoln Memorial on Sunday that we went to, so we saw quite a few performers, but...
The Boss.
We saw the Boss. Saw the Boss and U2 and Beyonce. And
Will.i.am.
And Will.i.am and Sheryl Crow and Stevie Wonder, and it was...
Now, I didn't make that. I was doing radio interviews for the Democratic caucus. They asked us to do different radio interviews, and I was with Randy Wade, and after that we went to some function for a group called J Street, but I didn't get to do it, and I really missed it. A lot of people who walked a great distance said it was phenomenal.
It was.
It really was pretty special. It was, we'd gotten into town that day, so that was the first thing we did, and it was sort of kicked off the whole weekend in this really beautiful spirit, because the whole time that we're in D.C., everywhere we go, there's just tons of people, and they're all wearing their Obama shirts and their Obama buttons. And the friend of mine that was with me said he'd never seen a city approach one event with such total commonality of purpose. I mean, everybody you interacted with and every business you went to had the same sort of energy about what was happening, and the concert sort of epitomized all that. You had all these people from all over the country who were there celebrating. Even though we were freezing cold, it was still such a wonderful patriotic spirit.
Right.
Regina, did you go to the concert too?
I did. I went to the concert. I didn't get as close as, I don't know how close you were able to get, Carrie, if you were able to get where you actually saw the live people. But again, got in front of a great jumbotron.
Yeah.
Got in front of a great jumbotron and was able to really enjoy that concert. And it was fantastic. And then to cap it off, when President-elect at that time, Obama, came, I mean, I was just...
Oh, that's right, he appeared there.
Yes,
too.
He appeared there. He and the family were there, and he spoke, and that just was the perfect icing on the perfect cake.
I listened to it on the radio, and the traffic was so... I went down Pennsylvania Avenue, had to turn, make a U, and get out of it. The traffic got difficult. And I heard Pete Seeger.
Oh, yeah.
And that was great, just listen to the radio. I wished I was there.
Yeah.
But it's on HBO.
When?
You can watch it. It's been on all week, actually. I've seen it a couple of times. So if you've got HBO, yeah, you can watch it. It's wonderful. You'll see it from start to finish.
Well, it was a marvelous inaugural, and President Obama has got about as difficult a job as Lionel Hollins has. You don't know Lionel Hollins?
No.
Well, he's the new coach of the Grizzlies, and they're pretty bad. The economy is as bad as the Grizzly basketball team has been. And George Bush, it was kind of like the previous coach, and he didn't give Lionel a very good group of players. The president's putting together a good team. He's got a tough job. Kerry, you were real active in the campaign, were you not?
I was. I got real active sometime mid-summer of 2008, and was lucky enough to partner up with some great individuals like Nika Jackson and Tony Hines and some other people that had been working on the campaign since the primary. And I got to register a lot of people to vote, got to organize canvassing drives and voter mobilization drives to try to get people out to the polls, and it was a fantastic experience. It was another great opportunity where I got to meet a lot of really engaged people, really smart, active people who had not been previously involved in political campaigns or been involved in politics, but felt like this was an opportunity that they just couldn't pass up, that they wanted to contribute to this.
Was this your first major involvement in politics?
Yeah, it was. It was. And people that have been doing this for a lot longer than I have keep telling me how spoiled I am and that there'll never be another one like this, which is probably true, but it was certainly a great thing to get introduced to this way.
Were either of y'all involved in the campaign?
I was. In fact, that's where I knew Kerry. And when they called and they said Kerry was going to be here, I said, oh, he was one of the lead people active on the campaign. But I went to a meeting that Nika Jackson gave for volunteers. And there was another woman there. I don't remember who she was. Kerry, you may remember. But she gave her testimony of why she was involved. And she took off her job and just volunteered to serve the campaign because she was so inspired. And from listening to her, I was like, I'm on board, because I had been looking for ways to participate before that. But from that point forward, I started organizing meetings at our home. I started to go out and register voters. We did call-in parties with MoveOn.org. We also came to the office and made calls, and I also took people to the polls. So I had never been that engaged in any campaign before. So the next natural thing to do was to plan the inauguration and actually take some folks to that. So
you took a bunch of folks from Memphis?
Yes.
And they had, I presume, and I don't know, were they mostly in the standing area beyond on the mall?
Everyone, with the exception, there was two other people that came with me to get tickets. Everyone else was in the standing general mall area. So we dispersed when we got there, but we were one of the few buses that was able to actually get on the mall and park close to the mall. We had, our buses had gotten permits to get into Washington, D.C. and park very close to the mall, so we let people off and people dispersed, but mostly everyone was just in the National Mall area.
And those people, by being part of the whole event and just the spirit, I presume they had just as wonderful a time?
Oh, just to hear them talk about this was absolutely a moment in history they never, ever fathomed it would be as great as it was, and it just meant so much to people for so many different reasons.
Right.
None of us, never in my lifetime did I think I would ever see this. So it's been a very surreal kind of experience.
Yeah, I think it's been, I think for people that maybe were born and grew up in the 70s and 80s, there's a really surreal feeling around knowing that we were sort of inside history, and that history isn't something that sort of happened and stopped in 1968 or something, that this was a moment that we were going to be talking about for the rest of our lives in a very profound way. Right. And certainly a year ago I didn't think that I would ever have been a part of something like that. I don't think anybody did, but I think that we are in a nation that's dealing with some challenges of historic proportions, but I think what we saw on January 20th was something very positive that was equally historic and equally meaningful and will resonate for a long time to come.
Well, I mean, as I look at that, this was something that I felt like I really felt like something like this could happen in my lifetime. And I think
You're younger than all of us.
Well, I don't think so. I really don't think so. The truth of the matter, I'm a product of the 60s, and I think for my parents, and I have a grandmother who's still living at 99 years old, it would probably be something that they didn't think would happen. But I grew up in a very diverse environment, coming from Shelby County and born and raised in Memphis. And so I think that I did feel like something like this was possible within my lifetime.
Well, your optimism was well-founded. I sat where you are, with Ben Hooks, the day before the Tennessee primary, and told Reverend Hooks that I was endorsing Obama, and he said he's not going to win.
Really?
And I said, I don't agree with that. I think he's going to win. And he said, he'll never get the votes those people up there in Minnesota and North Dakota and Wyoming. And why, you know, I guess he didn't even consider getting the votes in Arkansas, Alabama, and Mississippi. But I said, no, he's going to carry those states easy. And he called me later, and he was there and joyous. He said, you were right. And a lot of people didn't think it. But, you know, Robert Kennedy in 1968, after Dr. King was assassinated here, told a crowd in Indianapolis that there will be a black person elected president. He said it may not be for 40 years. And indeed, it was 40 years.
Wow.
And Dr. King made some remark I read about, I think maybe 45 years ago, saying within 40 years or by the year 2000. So some people had that kind of optimism and hope. Barack Obama's special.
He is.
And Carrie, you say about maybe not again. My Obama moment in my youth, in real youth, 11 years old, was John Kennedy. And I think there are parallels with John Kennedy and Barack Obama. And it's taken 48 years for something like that to occur. I mean, beyond the race and religion ceilings that were broken, Catholic, African American, beyond the attractive wife and the cute kids. I mean, these were two younger guys with new ideas and wanting to take the country in a different direction, following Republican administrations that have been one fairly staid and one unsuccessful, and bring a new vitality. There hadn't been a vitality about government in general.
That's right.
Since John Kennedy, really.
I really am hopeful that he will do a lot to make public service cool again.
Right, right.
I mean, I work at a charter school in the inner city that's a 6th through 9th grade right now, and knowing as I was standing in the tunnel that those kids were watching the experience on TV, and the thing that occurred to me was that they weren't necessarily watching, to them it wasn't the first black president, it was just the president being sworn in. And what they were seeing was somebody who was doing something that they could aspire to. And I hope that it never occurs to them necessarily that this was ever something that they wouldn't aspire to, you know. And I think that it has, you know, just in terms of the celebrities and the people that we saw come out, the people that were in the crowd, Beyonce's and Mary J. Blige's and the people, I mean, he's an incredible personality in the way he's sort of been able to fuse what is cool with what is meaningful in terms of giving back to the community and serving the public.
Right, they say transformational.
Absolutely.
And I think what I love the most about his campaign, I was in Grant Park.
Chicago, election night.
On election night. And to look at the people, as we've all said, the diverse group of people, all ages, all races, all nationalities, all walks of life, there together in complete harmony. It was a love fest there. I mean, that's what excites me so much, that so many barriers have been broken down through his campaign. How many of us, as you said, when you heard that there had been no incidents, no fights, no arrest, how many times do all cultures come together, that many in one place, and you have just such camaraderie, such friendship, such harmony, such, I mean, everybody's just such one purpose, one, you know. I love that.
Right, that's true.
Well, his administration so far has gotten off to a great start. I mean, some of the things, tolerance, liberty, justice, these are some of the standard values of our country that have made our country so great. and he's trying to see the government's transparent and open. And the first bill he signed was a children's health plan, which does a lot for Memphis because it helps the med, but it does a lot for children. And that was something Bush vetoed, and it shows the difference in these two administrations trying to get children health care that was denied in the last Congress by the president. Opening up for better green power with California and air standards, and having higher requirements on Detroit to produce cars that are fuel efficient and don't jeopardize the environment. So, you know, it was the first black president. He's also the first green president. That was a whole lot. There hadn't been a green president. He's opening up for green initiatives and solar and wind and alternative energy, renewable energies. That's so spectacular. Right. And then, you know, the women's issues with Lilly Ledbetter law, which just passed.
Yes.
And that was something else we didn't get through the last session. So there's a lot of things changing. Guantanamo closing, torture being seen as it is, and feeling that, you know, we ought to comply with the Geneva Convention. That shouldn't be a big deal, but it is. A lot of changes already. A lot of changes. Stephanie, what would you like to see Obama do to that would help people in Memphis and people at Alcee and Elvis Presley, other than order flowers every day?
I'm sure that there are a lot of initiatives that he will be putting in place, but I think that my platform is healthcare. As a cancer patient myself, there have been a lot of things over the last 2 years that have really been discouraging to me as far as the insurance system is concerned and health care. I think that I have been fortunate to get very good health care, but I think about all of the people who do not have the opportunity to get the health care that is actually due them for being a citizen of the United States. And so that's what I'm really hoping, is that he's going to be able to do this universal health care system. I don't know if that will be something that he will be able to implement in this 4 years, but I'm hoping we'll get 8 years. And I think within hopefully that period of time, maybe we will see something more positive than what we are seeing at this time.
I think we will, and he's made that a statement that he wants to do it. John Conyers is kind of my mentor in Congress, and that's been his main issue. And in fact, when we left the floor last week, he was complaining about Dr. Sanjay Gupta. He does not want him to be the Surgeon General, because Dr. Gupta has some differences on national health care, and apparently was not very polite to Michael Moore, but it's about national health care. There's already been some changes in the permission of certain drugs to be paid for by Medicaid for cancer patients that weren't allowed during the Bush administration. So there's already been some liberalizing, and I think that's good to have different opportunities for experiments. They're not necessarily experiments, but trials. A lot of people with cancer, you know, the upside is so great, and the downside is, so you have to try that.
Right.
And I think we're going to see something there.
Right. That's where I felt like, you know, there really were disparities in the treatment that I had with my providers were constantly sending out letters stating what they weren't going to cover anymore. And that is a concern.
But it's just wrong that certain people have the opportunities and others don't. And then we're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have some kind of health care policy like that. And so, you know, the stimulus package that we're getting passed has additional monies for the states for Medicaid, has a great deal of additional money for the National Institute of Health for research on cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, other debilitating diseases. And that's so important. And also COBRA, more money for people that need that COBRA extension, and allowing people to keep it if they're over 55 till they're 65 and get on the Medicaid. So we're making advances, and then the high-tech change on doctors' records. Hopefully that's part of this plan, and that will allow for doctors to more easily reference their patients' histories and make for better prognosis and treatment. So we're working on it. Kerry, what's your major issue? Education, healthcare?
Well,
music?
Music, of course. To the degree that our new president's a great music fan is certainly encouraging. I think that one of the things I'm most heartened by is sort of I think his ability to see all these issues interrelated, because as you were saying, I mean, I think he's going to put a lot of energy and work into creating more green jobs, which is great, because creating green jobs is creating jobs, and it's also lessening our dependence on a foreign source of oil, which means that that's a national security boon for us, which is good. So I think that doing some of those things, I mean, the economy is sort of first and foremost on everybody's mind, but I think there are things that he needs to do that are in ways just as urgent but less sort of top of mind concerning the environment, a responsible end to the war in Iraq, a well-managed war in Afghanistan if one is warranted, and doing all of these things work in concert will, I think, bring the country back on track economically, and at the same time make us safer and make us more environmentally sound.
Stimulus plan had $50 million for the National Endowment for the Arts, and some of the Republicans go, oh, National Endowment for the Arts. But that's jobs, too.
Absolutely.
And there are people losing their jobs because corporate contributions have dropped.
Absolutely.
And they have less support, and orchestras and other artists have been hurt, and their work creates tourism, and they create a spirit. We had Dr. Scheer and Dr. Kemme on the other half of the show, and they talked about the need to have people have a better attitude to make the economy work. And if people don't have arts, listen to some music, that was part of it. They said in the 30s, that was the music helped get people out of it. I forget the particular song that played that Obama, maybe it's one that he and Michelle danced to, came out in 1936.
Right. Well, you can't talk to anybody that's an expert on cities and economic growth in urban areas without listening to talk about when you're attracting talent to your city. A lively arts and culture scene is absolutely critical. It's absolutely critical. And I think a president and administration that's smart enough to see how all these things interconnect and interrelate and are important and dependent to one another is going to be, I think, phenomenally successful.
And there was money in the bill for historically black colleges and universities to refurbish historic buildings. And of course, your neighbor is Lemoyne Owens, so some of that money will end up there.
Absolutely.
We got a minute or two left. I want Stephanie, tell me about your shirt there and your buttons. Regina, I'm sorry, your buttons and your shirt.
Well, I will tell you about this. This was one of the things that I was able to get when I was there. You know, one of the things that you want to do when you go to an event like this is collect some great souvenirs. So these buttons, this one,
good stuff to collect, didn't they?
they had great things.
Oh my God!
This one says "I was there," so I really love that. And I love this one because it has that it was the inauguration, has the date on it. But also, my husband designed some bookmarkers that we actually had out there. So we were working while we were there. And these are calendar bookmarkers, which you work with children in schools, a charter school. They have Black history information on the back.
Oh, very good.
I want to please give this to a well-deserving child.
Thank you very much.
Or 5
Wonderful.
children.
Sure.
Thank you, Regina. I think
Thank you.
we're about out of time. I thank each of you for being here. We all shared an historic moment, and I think America, the lights have been turned on again, and hopefully they'll stay on and they'll be bright. So Regina and Stephanie, Carrie, thank you very much for coming and sharing your experiences.
Thank you.
I was thrilled to be there too. It was just a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. I'm Steve Cohen. This has been Congressional Report. The 44th President of the United States is working for us. Thank you for letting me work with him. Thank you.